The Martians. Chapter 14. Mark, Dana asked as she shook him awake the next day. Mark had stayed up late emailing with KK as Annie or Irene had given her his NASA address and arranged for her messages to be forwarded. All the crew had joined in and it was a treat to pen pal with her. It was clear she was bright and as much of an outsider as they had all been at that age. She had a ton of questions, but not the dumb ones they got asked over and over. Mehwagado. Mark replied. Mark, wake up, we need to talk, Dana said gently again. Mark, what's up? He asked, his eyes still closed. There is an hour left on Redshift and according to the schedule Dr. Beck will be in the con. We need to talk to him, Mark. Is someone sick? Mark asked, now quite alert. No, but he needs to know, Mark. He will be your med officer once they get here. That's not 4 months. We can tell him then. No, Mark, now, I insist. Why? Because we are on Mars, and that means any one of us might die. If it is me and you live, he needs to know. We don't have to tell him anything else, about us, or you and anyone else, but he needs to know your course of treatment, and honestly I would like him to recover your meds from your personal gear and store them so no one else finds them. Oh. If you're sure. His private line name should be easy for you to remember, same as your middle name, Stella. Stella? Dana asked, apparently taken back by this. High school girlfriend, I think. Did she grow up in Alabama or something? No idea. Did you? My mom picked it out. Friend from the hood, I think. Small world. Mark went to the comm center and entered the appropriate code and name for a private line and waited for Chris to acknowledge. Stella CQ Hermes, Beck. Hey Chris, are you alone? The turnaround time was close to 12 minutes. In the meantime Dana and Mark stared at the screen and spoke only of their work on Mars. All of it would be seen and heard by Chris once he opened the line. Copy, Stella. Hey, guys. Beck said as his eyes nearly bulged out of his head. So Mark, I hear you're crazy and leaving messages in rocks. Good, glad you found a hobby. Yeah, Beth is on her way up to relieve me in 45 or so. How is Mars? We're going as fast as we can to get there. Copy. Hey Chris, things are good. I'm nowhere near as crazy as the media thinks I am. I was just, saying my piece in case things went south, and then when they came up with the plan, well, I thought you guys would want your names immortalized forever here. No need to thank me, you're welcome. I figured they would notice it and tell me to stop, but, well, they didn't. Reason we are calling, well, it's something I should have told you about a long time ago. This is Dana Abernathy, she and I are old friends and she was my doctor back home for a while. Anyway, Dana. Chris, Dr. Beck, it's, a pleasure to meet you at last. I ask you to keep this information private and privileged. I insisted on this call as I thought you should know in case I were unable to tell you later. I've been treating Mark for depression for some time. Straight up Wellbutrin, nothing major and nothing I could report to NASA. Mark is quite well and managed without issue. A lot of his problems here were due to him, being a complete doofus, leaving his meds on the Hermes before landing. It should still be in my bag, Chris. You might want to grab it before, Missy and everyone here know about it and it hasn't been an issue for me in about 7 or 8 years. Mark interjected. Mark is well managed, so I never even considered reporting it, Dr. Beck, but I understand if you have some objection, well, please discuss it with me first. Dana concluded. 12 minutes later Chris replied. Copy. Mark, you should have told me that a long time ago. I wouldn't have scrubbed you. Jesus. Okay, well if you have been over it with Commander Lewis, I will keep it private unless it becomes a problem. You and I are going to have a long talk when you get here, Mark. All 3 of us. Dana, well it's a pleasure meeting you as well. I know we've talked before by text, but this is the first video they have let us have. Something about data compression, it's nice to see, put a face with the name Dana. Hey Mark, Beth took your personal gear with her on Earth, but it's back in your bunk now. She didn't mention anything, so I'm guessing she didn't inventory or, invade your privacy. She did find a photo of you and some girl and she's been trying to figure out who that is, but it was in a folder the refurb crew left so she might ask you about that. She said it fell out when she moved the folder. She will be here in a few, why not stay online and say hi? It's great they decided to let us talk again, especially on video. I know we had text with Orion since it left Earth. I feel like I know everybody there already, but you know, seeing a person's facial expression is half the conversation. We figured once you guys arrived they would open the lines up for all of us, but then NASA cut it all off. What was that all about? Mark thought it was weird for Chris to be talking so much about communications, and that they had been restricted to text before. Even weirder that he mentioned it twice. It was as though there was a subtext to the conversation, but he couldn't figure out what it was. He seemed almost nervous or startled. Did Chris want him to text message him later or something? Copy that. Oh, Montrose wanted a presser when we got here but we were all beat. Missy and Mindy found reasons to put it off for a couple days and Annie had Mitch drop the hammer on us. Then the whole Watney is cray cray thing came up. Mark replied. Just then Mindy came up to Mark's bunk aka the comm center and sat beside him, with Donna on the other side. Hey. Are you talking to Hermes? Sure, join us, that ugly guy on the screen is my best friend Chris. Wave at Chris Mindy. Mindy did and the trio waited for Chris to reply. Just before he did, Beth entered the Hermes comm, stared at the screen and recognized an enchanting pair of eyes. Hey Mindy and Donna, this is Beth. Say hi Beth Chris said, echoing Mark's jest from 12 minutes before. Who? Why are you on Mars? Beth asked. I'm the mission commander for Victoria I. Donna is our doctor. We've talked by text a bunch of times. It's good to finally see you. It's so good to meet you at last Beth, I mean that. Mark has told us all what a bright and charming person you are. Bragging on the Hermes crew is his favorite hobby, other than writing weird things with rocks. Hey Beth, it's great to see you. And Big Brother NASA is letting us talk again. 12 minutes later Beth's reply arrived. In the interim her face became more and more confused and distressed looking. Good talking to you. I need to get to work. Hermes out. Beth said as she disconnected the channel. Chris was staring at her with a what the fuck look on his face as she did. Well, that was weird, even by Mars standards. She really is nice, we must have just caught her at a bad time or waking up or something. No, she would have been awake for an hour at least by the schedule. Donna said. Donna's right. That girl is pissed about something. What did you say to her Mark? Nothing, you were here, you saw the whole thing. I'm telling you, Donna, tell her, that's just Beth being, well, I guess focused on her work. No, she was pissed off. Trust me Mark. I know that look. Donna said. Donna's right. Mindy added. Well shit Mark thought, I thought we were good. I can't fucking win. For all the work that setting up Ars 3 had been, the botany lab at Ars 4 was a piece of cake. It arrived on a landing sled and the hardest parts were taking the landing thrusters off the sled, removing the cover, and then, much later, putting dirt in it. NASA had gone back to a design idea from the teens of having it inflate, not just by filling the interior, but also the pre-insulated, triple-layered walls, with nitrogen as well. Literally all the crew had to do was turn the valve on a tank that was already attached, then drive posts into the ground around it just to hold it down. While Mark was doing that, Donna and Lewis were filling the walls with an expanding structural foam, with Mindy and Ann setting up the lighting grids inside. A water recycler, atmospheric and humidity control was wheeled in, as was a heating unit and backups. All rolled into the hab easily. Finally, a primary power transfer unit and redundant one were carried in and connected. They were light and small enough to not require wheels. All the systems had connectors to a silicon plastic and gold-plated connection that led to the external power supply, in this case a bank of solar cells on stilts and two beryllium reactor units parked a good 100 yards away and pointed out into space. All the power units had miniaturized compressors and jets to occasionally blow dust off as it was expected that the plants inside would outlast the mission and instruments left inside would track their growth. That was one day's work and the crew was exhausted. The next day was the hard work as 3 members of the crew, including Mark, screened dirt to remove big rocks, and then hauled it with a wheelbarrow-like cart that NASA had sent and dumped it on top of landscaping cloth, just like on Earth from a hardware store. Being NASA, this cloth probably cost $100K and was certified by a doctoral dissertation peer-reviewed by the best landscape cloth experts in the world. The cloth went over a drainage system so that excess water would not freeze on the bottom and could be recycled back into the irrigation sprayers after the washed-out iron could be collected, with a peer-reviewed magnetic trap. A fertilizer blend, literally baked cow manure, was layered in with the dirt. It contained no bacteria and went in with the cold Martian soil to enrich it when warmed. NASA wanted complete control over the bacteria in the soil, and this had been sent with Victoria I and kept warm. The airlock had not been installed, so getting the soil in wasn't terrible, but it took all of that day and most of the next to get a sufficient amount. Mindy and Donna had the task of filling the beryllium reaction units with enriched nuclear waste. This was frozen in multiple shielded containers which were inserted into the unit and then the containers removed. Once near each other they emitted just enough energy to melt, although not enough to create any useful amount of current. The beryllium reaction unit began as an idea to create a more effective solar cell that didn't work. When beryllium is exposed to the radiation of the sun, it becomes a gamma emitter, and the idea was to use a sheet of it to start a low-grade reaction in the waste. When an atom divides, its electrons are released until they find somewhere to go and have a negative charge, so inductors placed around it that are positively charged collect the moving electrons and, much like the pickup on a guitar, transmits it as usable voltage. The current is returned to the unit via a negatively charged conductor at the center of the waste, completing the circuit and keeping the unit in compliance with Newton and Faraday. The research was started at Alabama A&T in the 90s, but it never worked on Earth as the planet is protected by the Van Allen belts, and the necessary particles to launch the reaction never made it to the box. In space it was a different story. Each unit has at its bottom a pool of frozen sodium salts mixed with graphite, and as soon as the waste was added and the front of the unit opened to allow radiation in, it overheated and the fuel melted into the coolant. This happened at the Discovery Station, and the unit was cast off to the Moon's gravity just after Ars-3 launched the first time. An adjustable iris was installed on the next unit, and it had been providing some of the power to the station ever since. Since they are cheap and effective, and roughly the same size as a regular solar panel, the Orion was equipped with two that were still at close to 100% efficiency, and the ship had an overabundance of power along with its normal solar panels and the hydrogen cells that were barely turned on. Running the Botany hat was the final experiment before they were added to the Hermes and every other craft NASA had in space. The one drawback is that the particle decay goes in whatever direction it feels like, and while the unit can be shielded on most of its surfaces, to completely block the front would just slowly shut the reaction down. So, if you get in front of one within a few meters, you will fry. At less than 100 meters, your children will be born with 3 arms and as many heads. To protect those nearby, the units are pointed away from where anyone might ever be. The good news is that it really doesn't matter so much which way you point them, so those on the Orion 3 are angled out towards the sky away from the areas the crew will be working in, and in transit take advantage of the artificial gravity provided by rotation to keep the coolant area on the downside of the reacting waste. They would be closed and jettisoned into space early in the approach to the Hermes. After the dirt, 2 water tanks mixed with a weak nitric acid solution were wheeled in and attached to the irrigation system. As the water was frozen solid, they would do nothing until the heat was turned on, and that happened the next day when the airlocks were attached, inflated, and filled with the same structural foam. Then overlays of HAB canvas was attached to the seams, the HAB was filled with an oxygen, CO2 and nitrogen mix, and the heat turned on. That completed the second day of the project. The third day was the easiest. It was nice and toasty inside and filled with what would have been a breathable atmosphere, except that it contained the chlorine discharge from the warming soil. The watering system was turned on and the chlorine was soon replaced with the variety of gases and compounds that are created when perchlorate reacts with nitric acid. Those the atmospheric system could remove, and the excess acid would enrich the soil with a necessary nutrient. That was all that could be done on the third day, and as everything was remotely available on a control panel in the Orion 3 Com Center, Mark did it without suiting up. The chlorine removal took a few days, during which the crew began collecting samples from the surrounding terrain. This time Mark was admonished to not write anything in Morse code. After a few days the perchlorate were gone and the acidity of the soil was at proper levels for growing. It was time to mix the night soil and bacteria. NASA had Mark bring some starter soil from Mars 3 in case that which they sent on Orion 3 didn't make the trip. It was a good idea as one or the other was apt to fail, however both survived. Missy asked for volunteers to assist Mark in mixing the bacteria with excrement collected the last 2 weeks of their overland trip, as well as another 200-kilo container of NASA-approved space poop, and was surprised that everyone but her volunteered. This wasn't so much that they looked forward to it, but that they were sick of digging rock and soil samples, and Mark had told them in advance they would leave their EVA suits on to avoid the smell. On learning this around the dinner table, Missy volunteered too, and Dana suggested that as they had worked every day for about 3 weeks, a couple days off was in order. The Hermes wasn't due for many months and there was plenty of time to finish the work of Mars 4, in that over half of the expected samples were already collected. Much ibuprofen had been consumed as a result. "Don't we need to plant the garden after the poop mix?" Missy asked Mark. "Yeah, but we need to let the soil normalize first. I didn't have time to do that at Mars 3, but really we should wait for it all to decompose. Should take a few days, it will be helped along by the irrigation, we'll keep the dirt muddy. Hopefully we can plant in 5 days or so." "What order will we plant in? I mean, to have everything arrive at the same time, don't we?" Mindy started to ask. "Plant it all at once. It will come ripe at different times, but this is mostly for science, not food. Of course, if it checks out, we can eat it anyway, or a lot of it. Some NASA will want us to fly back." Mark grew great corn, and potatoes. Missy said. "Oh, I would love a baked potato now," Anna exclaimed. "Truthfully, you get kind of sick of them," Mark answered. On another note guys, in the dump today was a request from Montrose for us to do some news spots. "Does anyone watch the weeklies we've been doing?" Dana asked. "The ratings suck. We've made surviving on Mars boring again," Missy replied, but she came up with an interesting idea. "How would you feel about doing some Here's What We're Doing on Mars segments geared for teens and young adults? Would we have creative input, or would it be the same boring crap they always put out?" Mindy asked, surprising everyone with her candor. "What if we take the initiative and just write it ourselves? That might be a good way to relieve the monotony anyway," Dana suggested.